Hey, what's good, everybody? I'd like to welcome you all back to the Boombox Guru channel. So today I'm doing an albums re-ranking on Jinjer. I know a lot of y'all tuned in. I think it was maybe earlier this year or maybe towards the end of last year. I did an albums ranking on Jinjer. Uh, I got some comments on it because most of you all know how Jinjer fans can be. Some of them, there were some of you who gave some constructive like responses and criticism to my video, and then there were some of you that really got over emotional about some of the placements that I had, some of the albums. But I decided to do a re-ranking because I've recently gone back listen to these albums, and I've also had a change of heart about where I place some of those albums, particularly the first, like where I placed number one and number two. I went back and looked at that video and I felt that that just wasn't right. So I have had a change of heart, and I thought that I would go ahead and do a re-ranking and just something that I felt was more satisfying. And to those of you who did respond to the original video, who had constructive criticism and responses and disagreements to what I said, I did take heed to what some of you guys were saying in your comments, and it did help me in some ways to go back and reevaluate some of these records, as well as to go back and really kind of rethink maybe where I place some of these albums. So without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and get started with this re-ranking. So at number four, I decided to put the band's official debut album, was considered their official debut album. I decided to put it at number four, which is Cloud Factory. And in my original video, I actually had this at number one. And I gotta be honest with you. Even looking back on that video, I felt that that was the wrong placement to put this album. And I think the main reason why I had Cloud Factory there is because at the time when I did that re-ranking video, I actually was listening to Cloud Factory quite a bit. So that's why it ended up being number one. But that really wasn't the right placement for it. Now I will clarify something, that Cloud Factory is actually one of my favorite Jinjer albums. I do enjoy this record a whole lot. But the reason why I'm deciding to demote it down to number four is because as good as this record is, I gotta be honest, this this really wasn't an album that really showed where Jinjer was really, they hadn't really found their sound. That's the best way to put it. Jinjer hadn't really found their sound at this point. A lot of this record is still more, is the sound is more into that melodic metalcore style that the band was really known for earlier on the earlier records. So they hadn't really gotten to the whole like progressive groove metal, almost gent style that they would later emphasize on the other records that come in after this one. I think Tati's vocals sounded great, but she hadn't really gotten to that point of what really blew the band up, such as like her vocal performance on Pisces, where her gutturals were just so deep and low that it blew everybody away. Now her clean vocals on here are still amazing; they're great, and also only one third. I think no, not one third, but only like 3/4 of the classic lineup, as we know it now, was intact. Tati was in the band, of course. Eugene was on bass. Uh, Roman, he's on guitars. They hadn't found their drummer, Vladi. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He wasn't in the band at this point, and they also had another guitar player, rhythm guitars. So they had a different drummer. So that classic lineup hadn't even fully come in intact yet. But in spite of all of that, there are some good songs on here that I really like. I really like some standouts for me. No Hoard of Value. I really enjoy that track. That's one of my favorites on the album. I think that particular song is one of the few on this album that really kind of shows an early sign of where the band would go. I consider that to be more of a progressive groove metal track as opposed to metalcore. Uh, I like Who Is Gonna Be the One, which is a fan favorite amongst Jinjer fans. It's still a live staple in their shows. Me and a friend we were fortunate enough to get to see them live towards the end of last year, and I believe they performed that song at that show. But great track. Although I do prefer the live version a little bit more, which is also a bonus track on this particular version of the album. This is the Napalm Records reissue of Cloud Factory. Let's see, Bad Water. I really like the Tool influence of that particular song. And Tati's vocal performance, she uses clean vocals, I believe, throughout that whole entire song, were really amazing. So that's another highlight. As well as When Two Empires Collide, which is one of the more heavier extreme tracks on the album. So I do enjoy this record. I still consider it to be one of my favorite Jinjer records, but I honestly, it can't be number one. It can't be number one because this at the point the band was still they were almost there. They were getting to that point, but they just still hadn't quite become the Jinjer that we know today. So this is why I'm deciding to downgrade it, demote it to number four. All right, so next at number three, uh, so this one moved up. This is Jinjer's latest album called Wallflowers. I think in the original video I did, I had this one at number four, but I bumped it up to number three. So the reason why I bumped Wallflowers up is because I actually enjoyed this album a lot more than I did when it first came out in 2021. I actually pre-ordered this record. I had a bundle. It was the CD and the shirt. Didn't really like the shirt too much. Luckily, at that last show, I got a better looking Jinjer shirt. But when this album first came out, I was a little put off by it. It didn't really connect with me that much. Uh, but I do enjoy it more. I'm kind of looking at this album as its own individual record because I think what really made me sort of be disappointed in it when it first came out was I was comparing it to Macro. That's what it was. I was comparing it to Macro. But I'm kind of looking at it as its own entity. Like I still don't think that this is Jinjer's best album thus far. I know a lot of Jinjer fans were going off saying, "Oh, Jinjer have exceeded. They've taken it to the next level and things of that nature." I still don't agree with that. While I do think that Wallflowers is a good album, I just don't agree with those assessments of it. Um, I think that Jinjer just wanted to make a heavy record. I think they wanted to focus and hone in on the extreme side of their sound because that's what this record really is. It's very extreme. Now there are a few moments sprinkled throughout the record where they take things, they take things kind of mellow. You know how Jinjer is. They'll have a very extreme song and then they'll have like a mellow section that's kind of jazzy or some other kind of genre that's totally out of the realm of metal, and then they'll like bring things back up. There's some moments on this album that does that, but it's not like it was on previous records. For the most part, it's just straight up like freaking heavy and aggressive, man. Like I just think that I think when they did this record, they just wanted to focus in on that extreme sound that the band is known for. And I tell you another positive I picked up on is the Lamb of God influences, because I've read and I've listened to interviews from Jinjer where they've discussed Lamb of God being one of their favorite bands, and you definitely get a lot of that influence on this record, especially on the first track, "Called Me a Symbol." Like you hear a lot of it when that opening riff and that rhythm, that drumming comes in, and even Tati's vocals in some aspects, her harsh vocals kind of channel Randy Blythe a little bit. Not that they're totally ripping him off or anything like that. It's just that you really hear those influences a lot more on this record. But I still dig the record. I still think it's pretty good. I mean, there's a few moments on here where things kind of get a little samey and things kind of run together, which I think sometimes that kind of is always kind of been like a minor critique about Jinjer albums. There's moments where things kind of start to sound all the same, and the tracks kind of run together. There are a few moments on this record where it gets like that, but for the most part, I think it was a solid record. I was just expecting them to really expand upon what they did on Macro. So I kind of still look at it as more of kind of maybe like a step backwards compared to what they did on Macro. But I do like this record a lot more. So I still don't really spin it as much as I do the other records, but I still appreciate it a lot more for what it is. But at least I did bump it up from number four to number three, at least, man. So that goes to show you that I do have some likability to this record. But as far as me thinking that it's the best thing that Jinjer has done thus far, nah, I can't agree with that. I can't jack that. I'm gonna stick to my guns, and I'm gonna say that I think that is a solid record, and it was cool to see them kind of expand, well, focus in on the stream and aggressive side of their sound. But I hope with the next record that they come out with that they kind of will just give me more surprises like they did on Macro. But yeah, Wallflowers, this video, bumping it up to number three. All right, so now we're getting down to the last two. All right, so for my number two, I'm going with King of Everything. And I know this is probably going to make a lot of you guys out there, a lot of you Jinjer fans still mad, but hey, think about it. The last video I had this at number 3. I bumped it up to number 2. So that should tell you something. Now, most majority of Jinjer fans, they will tell you that King of Everything is Jinjer's best album overall. That's what a lot of them say. That's what the consensus seems to be amongst the fan base. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. I think that it's their, you could say their second best album. You could argue that it's their second best album. So my reason for bumping it up to number 2 is because going back and re-listening to this record, I realized that, you know what, this was the record where Jinjer, I think, really became Jinjer. And if I'm correct, this was the first one where they actually got their drummer, Vladi. I think this is where he joined the band. This might have been the first album with him. So this is like the first record with the classic lineup as we know it. And I also feel that this is where they moved away from that more melodic metalcore sound of Cloud Factory and the prior era of the band. And this is where they took things to that more progressive groove metal sound that they're usually described as. I know Jinjer likes to be called a metalcore band, which is fine, but if you go on their official website describes them as a progressive groove metal band. And you really get that sound on here. I mean, yes, the guitar tone is a bit more genty as well. I mean, that whole style has pretty much become a standard in modern metal. But there's a lot of great groove on this record. And it also shows the beginning of the diversity of them adding different musical genres outside of metal into their sound, particularly like in the prologue, Beggar's Dance. You know, those two tracks, the intro and I guess you could call it the outro, they show a lot of Middle Eastern influences as well. And of course, this record has Jinjer's breakout song, which is Pisces. Pisces, when I first heard it, I was amazed by it. A lot of us were, but I'm pretty much over Pisces at this point. I mean, you still got reaction channels still reacting to that song, which, I mean, it's 7 years now, and people still reacting to it. But I'm over that song. I understand how great it was, how amazing it was when first witnessing that. But it also, on a positive note, it really showcased the growth in Tati's vocals, because that song, that displayed the use of her beautiful clean vocals, and then for her to just quickly switch to those low gutturals, it blew everybody's mind, because nobody was really used. I guess she wasn't exactly the first singer to do that, but I guess I'm trying to find the best way to put this. I'm guessing maybe in this generation, she's like the first female vocalist in metal that most people have seen really take her gutturals that low. And I might be incorrect on that. There may have been any number of other female vocalists who have done the same thing. I'm not sure, but it was just surprising to see her just quickly switch from those really beautiful clean vocals and then just go so death metal guttural on that particular song. And it also showcased, which I think is a trademark of Jinjer's sound, how they can be so extreme and then they can just totally switch to something different. I mean, the way that Pisces, I'm kind of doing a review on that song, but it's just that the way that song just started out as a kind of mellow, kind of jazz fusion type track, and then it just quickly goes into this really slow and groove laden, heavy extreme song. It really displayed how great of musicians they were, and that they are. But the reason why I have it at number 2 is because I think that this record, it really brought the band, and they really came into their own at this point, and they really kind of put out their trademark style. Because I think Jinjer does, in spite of everything, I think Jinjer does have a signature sound. And I think this record was an introduction to it. But the reason why I don't put it at number 1 is because a lot of the songs felt like they had the potential to do more with what they had, and they just didn't. Like, some of the songs just feel like they don't really go anywhere, and they had the potential to really take things a little bit further, but they just didn't. I don't know. That's just how I feel about it. And there's also, like, I guess towards kind of like maybe the middle of the album, there's times where some of the songs kind of get the sounding the same, and they kind of run together a little bit, and you don't even realize you're listening to another track at some point. It kind of does that, which is something I think that Jinjer could hopefully improve upon on later releases, man. Because that seems to be kind of a thing that happens on their albums a lot of times. That's just my personal opinion. You know, those who want to disagree, hey, that's you. But that's just how I feel about it. But yeah, I bumped it up at number two because I gotta say that this was the album that really introduced Jinjer as we know it, and it really took them to the next level. I mean, it was a breakthrough record. Pisces took them to the next level. I mean, they're a huge band now because of that. How the viral that video of Pisces went. They're a huge band over here in America, in the states where I live at now. So it really took them to the next level, and yeah, it just really was a transition from them coming from the more melodic metalcore style Cloud Factory. But yeah, I like this album a lot more, but I can't put it in number one because I personally don't think that it's their best record. I think it's their second best. So I'm keeping it at number two. So hey, at least I think it's their second best now, and I don't have it as low as I did in the prior video. But I hope you guys will at least don't condemn me for that. But I probably will get some hate about having it at number two. But still, you know, I recognize it as being the album that really kind of brought Jinjer and made them who they are today in some regards. So yeah, King of Everything, number two. And so finally we get to my number one, and it's no guess about what my number one is. That's Macro, released in 2019. Yeah, this is my number one. This is my favorite Jinjer album. This is my favorite Jinjer album, and it was actually the first. I think this was the first Jinjer album that I actually bought, and it might have been, yeah, Cloud Factory was the first one that I listened to, but this was the first one that I bought because right around the time when I got into Jinjer, this album had, I think it was about to come out, or it had come out. But so this is one of the main reasons why I wanted to do this re-ranking, is because I felt that this was the one that I should have had at number one. I shouldn't have had Cloud Factory at number one in the original video. This is the one that should have been in that spot. That's why I wanted to do this re-ranking, because it's actually something that's been kind of bugging me ever since I did that original video. So I wanted to fix that. And I just think that Jinjer just, to me, this is Jinjer's best album thus far. This is their album thus far. Until they come out with something that will exceed what they done on this record, this is going to be my number one Jinjer album, and I'm going to stick to that. You know, the naysayers can get mad, whatever, leave your comments, whatever, but I'm going to stick to my guns that Macro is Jinjer's best album. And I'm going to tell you why, because I felt that this record was an even more improvement. I think it was a bigger improvement over King of Everything, man. Like I said about King of Everything, I just felt like a lot of the songs on there just didn't really go nowhere. I felt like a lot of times it was just kind of, it got to be like a repetitive groove that could have maybe just been trimmed down some. But with Macro, they showed so much more diversity, man. Like they really wanted to hone in and showing the fans and the listeners just how diverse of a band that they are. And they really did that. I mean, when you got songs like, I think it's Judgment and Punishment, where it starts out at this really heavy groove laden track, and then they can quickly switch to a reggae song and then switch back so quickly. That really shows how proficient of musicians that they are, because that's not something that can easily be done. You have to be a really great musician who is very tight and very precise with your instruments to really do something like that. So for them to be able to do something like that, that really shows how amazing of musicians that they are. But it's just so much diversity on this record, man. The fact that they were putting in like multiple different genres into one song, it reminded me of some of my favorite bands like Faith No More and Fishbone, who are well known for doing things like that, who were known for doing those type of tracks where they take metal music but then they blend it with all kinds of different genres that you wouldn't even expect to be a part of metal music. And that's what Jinjer really did on this record. And as much as people still pawn over Pisces, I mean, you got a song like Home Back that really showcased just how good of a vocalist Tati is. I mean, people still want to pawn over her gutturals and the way she alternates between clean and guttural vocals on Pisces, but she did an even better job on Home Back, in my personal opinion. I mean, come on, especially that's the last part of that song. When it slows down to that real heavy groove, and she starts talking about wanting her home back. Like her gutturals are, to me, her gutturals on that part were even lower than what she did on Pisces. So, and you know something, it's really amazing how a lot of Jinjer fans don't even think that Macro is that good of a record. A lot of Jinjer fans tend to think that this was a step backwards. Beats me, but and it could be different for me because this was actually the first Jinjer album that I bought. But I just think that I think this was an improvement. I think this was an improvement. I think they really just took things to the next level, and that's why I was a little bit disappointed in Wallflower, because I felt that Jinjer had really did something amazing on this record, and I was expecting the next album to sort of like expand upon that. And I was really, after listening to this record, I was anticipating like, man, I wonder what Jinjer's gonna do next after Wallflower. I mean, after Macro. I wonder what the next album is gonna sound like. I was expecting them to really expand upon what they did on here, and they, to me, Wallflowers really just didn't do that. In my personal opinion, that's just how I felt. Now, I will say that as much as I like Macro, I gotta say that it still kind of does suffer from that thing where you have some songs, there's certain parts of the album where things start to kind of sound the same, and songs kind of run together. It does kind of suffer for that, but it's not as, it's a little bit lesser than on previous records. I would say that. I think it's a little bit lesser on previous records. I think Home Back, the placement of Home Back kind of helps to break up the monotony or whatever. I think the placement between Noah and the prophecy and everything like that, I think Home Back really helps to break that up. So I really like the placement of Home Back. But other than that, man, I really enjoy this record. My favorite Jinjer album, hands down. You know, I can't get enough, and I just don't really understand why a lot of the diehard Jinjer fans really don't like this album, because there's a lot of them who really bash this record and consider it to be lower and lesser than King of Everything, which, from what I hear with my ears, I think that it was an improvement and it exceeded what they did on King of Everything. So that's my number one, Macro. You know what I'm saying? Eat it or weep. That's all I gotta say. But I'm not changing my stance on Macro. For me, that's number one. For me, this is thus far Jinjer's best album. All right, so that's it for this. That's it for this video. That's my re-ranking of Jinjer's albums. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, just do me a huge favor, hit that thumbs up and give me a like, because it does help with the channel. Also, be sure to share this video on any platforms that you think would be interested in watching this. Share it on social media, anywhere where you think people who are into this type of stuff would appreciate a video like this. Just, in general, just share the video wherever you can. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button and tap that bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop new content. And as always, I want to thank everybody that's been supporting the channel, that's been watching the videos. I truly appreciate it. And as always, hope everybody has a blessed day, a blessed week, and love, peace, and music. Peace out, y'all.